Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Lost Art of Listening, 2nd edition, How Learning to Listen Can Improve Relationships, by Michael P. Nichols, Ph.D., narrated by Runnette. Introduction. Nothing hurts more than the sense that the people we care about aren't really listening. We never outgrow the need to have our feelings known. That's why a sympathetic ear is such a powerful force in human relationships, and why the failure to be understood is so painful. My ideas about listening have been sharpened by 35 years as a psychoanalyst and family therapist. Refereeing arguments between intimate partners, coaching parents to communicate with their children, and struggling myself to sustain empathy as my patients faced their demons has led me to the conclusion that much of the conflict in our lives can be explained by one simple fact. People don't really listen to each other. Talking without listening is like snipping an electrical cord in half and hoping that somehow something will light up. Most of the time, of course, we don't deliberately set out to break the connection. In fact, we're often baffled and dismayed by feeling left in the dark. Modern culture has developed conceptions of individualism that picture us finding our own bearings within, declaring independence from the webs of interlocution that formed us. It's as though, when we become finished persons, we outgrow our need for attention, like training wheels. All this is not to say that we can't be autonomous, in the sense of being self-directing, even original, able to think and act on our own. But we cannot escape the human condition and become secure and satisfied without conversation. Conversation in a broad sense, meaning some kind of interchange with others. Contemporary pressures have regrettably shrunk our attention spans and impoverished the quality of listening in our lives. We live in hurried times, when dinner is something you zap in the microwave and keeping up with the latest books and movies means reading the reviews. That's all we've got time for. Running to and from our many obligations, we get a lot of practice in not listening. When we're in the car and the radio is on, sometimes it's interesting, and we pay attention. Other times we have to concentrate on the road, or we get sidetracked with a thought, and minutes go by without our hearing a word of what was said. When we're watching TV and the commercials come on, half the time we don't hear a thing. We're bombarded with so many images, from television, email, junk mail, the internet, cell phones, Blackberries, iPods, pagers, faxes, that our attention is fractionated. We like to think we're good at multitasking. We check our email while talking on the phone, we look for things to buy in catalogs while watching TV. We fool ourselves into thinking that we can do more than one thing at a time. The truth is that we just end up doing one thing after another, poorly. We've gained unparalleled access to information, and lost something very important. We've lost the habit of concentrating our attention. From pop music at the gym to commercials on TV and radio, we're bombarded with so much noise that we've become experts at tuning things out. If a television show doesn't grab our attention in the first 2 minutes, we change the channel. If we're listening to someone who doesn't get right to something we're interested in, we tune out. In the limited time we still preserve for family and friends, conversation is often preempted by soothing and passive distractions. Too tired to talk and listen, we settle instead for the lulling charms of electronic devices that project pictures, make music, or bleep across display screens. Is it this way of life that's made us forget how to listen? Perhaps. But maybe the modern approach to life is the effect, rather than the cause, of the decline of meaningful discourse. Maybe we lead this kind of life because we're seeking some sort of solace, something to counteract the dimming of the spirit we feel when no one is listening. How we lost the art of listening is certainly a matter for debate. What isn't debatable is that the loss leaves us with an ever-widening hole in our lives. It might take the form of a vague sense of discontent, sadness, or deprivation. We miss the consolation of lending an attentive ear and of receiving the same in return, but we don't know what's wrong or how to fix it. Over time, this lack of listening impoverishes our most important relationships. We hurt each other unnecessarily by failing to acknowledge what the other one has to say. Whatever the arena, our hearts experience the failure to be heard as an absence of concern. Conflict doesn't necessarily disappear when we acknowledge each other's point of view, but it's almost certain to get worse if we don't. So why don't we take time to hear each other? Because the simple art of listening isn't so simple. Often it's a burden, not perhaps the perfunctory attention we grant as part of the give and take of everyday life, but the sustained attention of careful listening. That takes strenuous and unselfish restraint. To listen well, we must forget ourselves and submit to the other person's need for attention. While some people may be easier to listen to than others, conversations take place between two people, both of whom contribute to the outcome. Unfortunately, when we fail to get through to each other, we have a tendency to fall back on blaming. It's his fault, he's selfish and insensitive. Or it's my fault, I'm too dependent and don't express myself well. Most failures of understanding are not due to self-absorption or bad faith, but to our own need to say something. We tend to react to what is said, rather than concentrating on what the other person is trying to express. Emotional reactions make us respond without thinking and crowd out understanding and concern. Each of us has characteristic ways of reacting defensively. We don't hear what's said because something in the speaker's message triggers hurt, anger, or impatience. Unfortunately, all the advice in the world about active listening can't overcome the maddening tendency to react defensively to each other. To become better listeners and to transform our relationships, we must identify and harness the emotional triggers that generate anxiety and cause misunderstanding and conflict. If this seems too formidable a task, remember that most of us are more capable than we give ourselves credit for. We concentrate pretty hard at work, and most of us still enjoy earnest, open conversation with a few friends. In fact, talking with friends is a model of what conversation can be. Safe enough to talk about what matters, concerned enough to listen, honest enough to tell the truth, and tactful enough to know when not to. More relationships can be like this. In the process of writing this book, I've tried to become a better listener, in my personal as well as professional life. To listen a little harder to my wife's complaints without getting defensive, and to hear my children's opinions before giving my own. However, I've had a few conversations that left me feeling bruised and defeated. My wife would speak sharply to me about not helping out more around the house or not listening to her, and I'd feel attacked. Or I'd call my editor one too many times to complain about the burdens of writing, and she'd make me feel like a burden for complaining. Or my friend Rich would call me the part of your anatomy you sit on for acting like I was entitled to some special consideration. Not only didn't I listen at these times, hear and acknowledge what the other person was saying, but I got hurt and angry, and completely unwilling to talk to that person ever again as long as I live. I'm sure you know how painful such misunderstandings can be. When my wife yelled at me, my editor was mean to me, and my friend picked on me, I got hurt and withdrew. But what made these incidents especially painful was that just when I thought I was learning to listen better, these setbacks set me all the way back. Instead of just thinking that things hadn't gone well and needed repair, I felt defeated and inadequate. How could I, who couldn't even get along with the people in my own life, have the temerity to write a book about listening? How could I teach anyone anything about communicating? Maybe you know how that feels. When we try to change something in our lives, whether it's our diet or work habits or listening skills, and we experience a setback, we have a tendency to feel hopeless and give up. Suddenly, all the progress we thought we were making seems like an illusion. And maybe if I were reading a book.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?